All right. So myself, I'm quite new to daring sailing, having only been involved for a couple of seasons. And I guess when the boat comes out of the shed at the start of the season, there must be a few things we need to look for when it comes to standing rigging, mast, shrouds. So who'd like to answer a question about what are the key things that we need to look for when it comes to the mast, standing rigging at the start of the season, but also keep an eye on throughout the season to ensure we're going to get optimum performance out of the boat.
So I'll kick off with, I think the first thing is not to assume the mast is anywhere near where it was when you left it at the end of last season, because Lano's always going to take things apart, put them back together, but they don't go back together the way you get them. So assume you're going to have to take a look at the shroud tensions, the probably mast foot position as well, and things like that. Is you want it to be back where it was. If you're happy just to get wing it, then fine. But then yeah, typically making sure the even the sheets are through the ratchets the right way, and things like that. Anyway, back to the standing rigging, which I guess is really what we're talking about now. The mast foot, normally you'd have a couple of bolts in the plate at the bottom, and if you take a photograph or something like that, you should be able to work that out pretty simply. It's pretty hard to move if you've got a shroud tension, so make sure your shroud's off, back stays off, and then you should be able to kick it forwards and put it back with a rope to adjust it. Position wise, I'll defer to more intelligent people about where they should be. And then also remember that every once in a while they're going to change the standing rigging, so you might think your forestay is the same length as it was last year, but there's a good chance that one in 4 years that it's been changed, perhaps. Maybe a bit of what the rule says, but don't assume that's going to be the same length. Even the shrouds as well. So assume you're going to have to do some work if you want it to be back where it was before.
I will briefly interrupt and say if there's any constructive disagreement between our panel, then that's actually really good. I'll highlight some differences in philosophy. So don't be afraid to somebody else has said.
I sail half the year racing Etchells, which is much a more tweaky boat, and we're moving a mast step for every race up to sort of half an inch, minor adjustments. We're changing forestay lengths by between 20 and 30 millimeters for light airs and strong winds. The principles are the same for whether we're on the Daring or whether we're on the Etchells or other planes, but and a lot of this tweakiness that we use in the Etchells we don't have because we've got stiffer masts in the Daring. But the principles are the same. Get the mast foot in the right place. Check your forestay length is a starting point, and then do your lateral adjustment of your lowers and caps. And what I've been struggling to find is I've got a nice table for the Etchells where I measure from the transom to the base of the mast, and I know what that is down to millimeters, and I can position the mast foot on the Etchells precisely, and then I know where I'm varying from base. I don't have that dimension on the Daring, and 2 years ago when I came back into the Dynamite Syndicate, I found there were no retaining bolts, and the mast foot was moving back and forth with the main halyard. If we put the main halyard on tight, it pulled the bottom of the mast back. So at least we put some pins in to stop it doing that. And then during this last winter, Lellows have kindly fitted a new fine-tune adjustment for the outhaul and put it into one of the holes on the mast base, so we can't move it back as far as I used to be able to. But nevertheless, that the level of movement that we do on the Etchells is on the mast base is minimal, 10 millimeters maximum, and that's really at the sort of 1-3 level. So getting it in the right place is a starting point. I'd start with the mast base, get used to where that is from last season. And John, maybe you've got some measurements that know where to put it.
They're all different. All the boats are very different, actually. I think actual sailors, people used to measuring, actually horrified about how different the Daring zone positions are.
Nicely different, yeah.
But I think Giles made a really good point about if you put the boat into Lellows and it comes out next year, everything will be completely different. So what you need to do is you need to photograph you need to photograph and measure the shrouds before you let them take the boat apart. So you get a little ruler, a little plastic ruler, and you hold that next to it. rigging screw and you take photographs of them. You photograph the mast step, so you know exactly where that was. But you also need this information to improve the boat throughout the season. You've got to know where your starting point is. So you should have that anyway. But in terms of actual setup, I mean, I never put my boat into Lalo's, so I never had that issue. But I know people do. The boat's all about the mainsail, in my view, and it really is the accelerator of the boat. And if you don't set that correctly, I mean, it sounds obvious, but even not having maximum mainsail handed on slow you down. There's a little bit of metal in the top of the mast and the groove, so you can't actually pull the mainsail above the legal point. So where do you start? Well, you start with the halyard all the way up. It's absolute maximum. I have a block and tackle system on mine. Well, I say mine, it's not my boat anymore, but I still think it's my boat. And that goes on at the start of every beat, end of every line. It goes on at the maximum. So then we're talking about leech length, and all the mainsails, each batch of mainsails has a different leech length. My second last mainsail had a much shorter leech length than maybe the last one we had before. So then you've got to start playing with the rig from there. So it all starts with the main sheet. The main sheet needs to be block to block in 15 knots of wind. And everything starts in there. So if your halyard isn't maximum, then you won't have the mast rake correctly. That gets your mast rake up correctly. Then your main shrouds. I've always had the B1s much tighter than anyone else. Actually, mine don't need to rope to stop them flapping about and mooring. But what I did find was progressively I was having started with very, very tight D1s as well. I was in fact progressively, by the time I sold the boat, I got really quite slack D1s. And in case you're not aware, what the D1 does is it completely changes the. You're not necessarily trying to keep the mast straight.
But do I just interject in case there's confusion over what the D1s
Oh,
are?
I see. The lowers are the shrouds that do this. The vertical, these are the ones that go vertical. So
Which ones are the D1s?
these are the lower ones,
The lower ones.
the lower ones, because when I got into the fleet, I thought that I wanted to keep the mast straight, which is what you do on a normal yacht, an RT yacht, an offshore yacht. Trying to keep the mast as straight as possible. But actually, on a boat like a Daring, you're not trying to keep it straight. You actually want to control the middle of the mast.
Laterally, you're talking about.
Laterally, yes, because and once it's pointed out to you, it took me a long time before I realised it myself. Actually, I should have picked it up earlier. But the slacker you have your D1, the middle of the mast will move to leeward, and it has the effect of tightening the leash on the mainsail, so it makes the sail deeper, which is great in light airs. In a breeze, what you do is the opposite. You bend the mast to windward, which has the effect of flattening the sail off and easing the leash. It makes a huge amount of difference. Then you've got the business of where to put. You'll have your mast rake according to the main sheet, but then where does it go in? Where's the mast step? So what I do is I have the mast. Once I've got the rake set up, I put the mast as far aft as possible in the collar, and it's very simple. That's because I want to be able to rake it as far forward as possible, upwind. And that's another thing that I've never really quite got to the bottom of why it's so fast. But forward rake is unbelievably fast.
Soft forestay when with the spinnakers up, you can see the forestay
Wiggling around. It just take it from all of us here. It is astonishingly fast. There's a limit to how far you can rake your mast forward because there's only a limit in the column. If it's a boat like a 6 metre, you actually move the bottom of the mast from here to here, so you can rake it. You can't do that on Derry. So that's got you at the back of the collar when you're maximum rake on. Then you're looking for what to do with the jumper strut. Now, in my view, the backstay and the jumper struts have to work together. The backstay, I put it on just enough to stop it from flapping. You don't want it wiggling around in the breeze, because that's slow. But you don't really want it doing much more than that. So once you've got your mainsail looking good, you adjust the jumpers so that when the backstay's on, you've got the leach profile you want. And then in a breeze, you can just put a tiny bit more on, just to maybe open it, use the top of it. That's how I go about setting the
Were you
mast up.
setting your lowers and D1s for the conditions each
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so that's, I don't know.
Not not changing it very much. Don't need to wind on very many turns, where it does actually make quite a big difference.
John, I'm awfully sorry. I didn't understand the geometry you were describing about going upwind and downwind with your adjustments on the D1. You said the
Well,
mast
no,
curve.
not adjusting the D1s.
Okay.
I mean, you're letting the backstay go on downwind, so the
Yeah,
mast can flop far forward as
No,
possible.
earlier you talked about shaping the mast.
Ah, yes,
the
right. So this
difference
is
in that.
laterally sideways,
Yeah.
and this is an upwind upwind setting. If you tighten the D1s, your mast will actually, the top of the mast always bends over a bit,
Sure.
but the middle of the mast won't bend as much. So the mast appears bow to windward.
So it's concave in that sense.
Well, depends which way. Yes, it's concave, I suppose, the best way.
Yeah.
So the middle of the mainsail, the middle of the mainsail at the front is pulled to windward,
Yeah.
which, relative to the back of the sail, is creating is reducing the depth in the sail, and helping to spill wind.
Got you.
And that's the complete opposite of letting the middle of the mast fall to leeward, which deepens the
fills the
sail
yeah.
and effectively tightens the leach at the mainsail.
Got you. Sorry. And you adjust it every time.
No, not every time, but generally we had a default setting,
Right.
which, as I say, the default setting got looser and looser actually.
Right.
But it would have to be pretty breezy before we decided winding it on.
Mike, you've got adjustable table settings on the
We haven't got a table, no, we make it up as we go along.
Yeah.
But what about, do you play with the four-step?
I never played with ball, but what you would do on my basis for starting the default setting with block to block, the main sheets in lighter airs, you don't really want to go that tight on the sheet, but you still want to create as much weather helm as possible. So you would lengthen the forestay to drop the rig further back. We, funny enough, never really bothered with that actually. You know, we were going fast enough anyway, so we just, and the breeze always going up and down. And
Did you go model screws on the full stage?
I bought a really expensive rigging screw for the stove, which I wish I hadn't been bothered with actually. But it's one with a no not on it, and you could they come to New Zealand, but do it literally without a span.
That's what I've got.
Yeah, the H gets them in the actually.
Yeah, but the principle is you want rake, a lot of rake for light airs, and you take the rake forward in stronger airs. Ish, roughly.
Yes.
And you let the mast drop to leeward in light airs and hold it strong.
Yes, I mean the extras do that, don't they?
Yeah, well, we've got adjustable model screws and we're allowed to adjust them during the racing, so they're changing.
Oh really? On an actual?
Yeah, we're changing lowers and uppers while racing. We're allowed to do that.
I have no idea. It's allowed. Yeah,
Can't adjust forestay and mast space while racing, but you can adjust it. You can, but you're not allowed. I've got but that's fine tuning. It's not appropriate for doing, but the principles are the same. Mast back, block to block, light airs, take the mast forward in stronger winds, pump it to weather in stronger winds. The principles are the same.
And David, if you lost your you said you've made a grid of measurements that you want the base of your mast to be. Say you lost that and you just had to visually you put it in the right spot. What are you looking for?
Well, mine's pretty well marked up with tape and codes. I've even got vernier gauges for the bottle screws because don't trust the numbers on the bottle screws. I read with a ruler. The only thing I found in our class rules says 6 inches of rake from vertical. How do you measure that when you're out there? How do you measure your jumper's tension apart from when the rig's out during the winter or any time? But you've got to get some visual reference points to know where to start. So I know from photographs I've taken of when I've got the boat perfectly set up, I know what I'm looking for, and I bring out my verniers and I can just quickly change everything to my starting position and then can adjust from there. So as John and Giles both said, remember at the end of the season, if you feel it's good at the end of the season, record it before you put the boat into winter storage. And yes, every time I've checked dynamite at the beginning of the season, forestay's been on a different hole in on the attachment points, different pins, mast is in a different place at the base, and rigging not in the center of the boat, different tensions all over the place.
But roughly how much time would you say it takes you to check everything at the start of the season on your boat?
Setting up dynamite this year took me 2 hours. So Charles Matthews and I went out and we just did the basic thing. So it was flat calm. So one simple way of checking that the mast is in the middle of the boat, we had a bucket of water on the main halyard and just hanging it over one side, hanging it over the other side, and both of us trying to stay in the middle of the boat while we did that, so that you're not affecting it with your body weight. With the lowers loosened off, just checking on the verticals that the mast was in the middle of the boat laterally. Get that right first, then tension up your diagonals to make sure you're not pulling a kink into it as you go. And then we looked at up the mast and realised that we got that nice and set up, and the top was bending off, and that was the jumper tensions were different port to starboard, so adjusted the jumpers to just pull it into column.
Yeah, David made a good point about the jumper wires. There's nothing you can do on the boats out there, as far as I know. Correct me about tuning the jumper wires to be the same.
You can't get a gauge.
Measure it on.
Yeah, I do it when the mast is horizontal.
Yes. So that's when the boat comes out of the water at the end of the season before when the mast is taken down. And we've noticed quite often, and it's particularly obvious when you pull the backstay on the mast as well as coming back will lean over to one side as the jumper wires take up the tension. And we've had ours pretty tight in the past, and probably slacking them off a little bit now. But having that asymmetry is very noticeable. You find yourself going fast on one tack, you won't go the other, and so maybe this is something, Josh, that we just say to the Lallows. They need to, when the marks are out, get those tensions to be the same, and then at least everyone out here knows that if they think they're too tight, they can wind off 2 turns or something like that.
We say tension to be the same, but you think with our mast there's a bit of a permanent end in it somewhere, so yeah, it doesn't need to be the same.
But looking at the jumpers for the first time, Giles, what are you looking for as you're looking up the mast? The top is stiffer if the jumpers are tight, and it won't curl off. The tip won't come back. If the jumpers are loose, you get the tip coming back of the mast when you put your backstay.
Yes. So the jumper wires are really affecting the depth of the mainsail at the top when you pull the backstay on, and the masts, the mainsails are different. So what we tried to do with the batch that John's talking about, where the sail numbers are right up the top, that was a new batch that we asked RATSEs to make identical to the previous ones. Unfortunately, they switched tools. Their CAD tools were different, and they just inserted all the dimensions from the class rules into the CAD tools. John and I were talking to them.
We laid them out up in the loft anyway.
Yeah.
They were so different.
And they ended up completely different. So what we asked for was not what we got.
I mean, the one we laid one up because people would say, oh, they couldn't get main tension on the new.
Yeah, they couldn't get the leech tension.
And the leech is about this much longer.
Yeah.
Are we talking about the current sound?
No, the very newest one should have corrected quite a few of the things from the batch before, which was where the numbers were right up high on the mainsail. That's where they introduced this long leech because they just took it off the.
They also started this matter of making them out of three panels on the high. Because traditionally the roll widths used to be narrower, so they just this wide, whatever it was. And then the plot started being made out of wider rolls. So they were still making them out, they were cutting the roll, the pieces down, wasting a load of stuff in order to carry making them out of high. So we didn't know this. And then one of the new designers up there said, told us about it. So, you know, should we just go with the three? So we agreed that.
There's cost reduction.
Yeah, cost reduction a little bit. But there's actually on the subject of mainsails and jumpers, the mainsails are, I think they're very cleverly designed because they bed in, but they're incredibly flat when they start.
Yeah.
Very number fronted, really, really flat. So maybe you want to have a stiffer mast when they're brand new.
Yeah.
And then they bed in and then they last a long time. Actually.
Yeah.
I think
Stiffer mast meaning tighter
tighter
V one.
and as the sail sort of beds in, stretches, and then becomes this, I think, a really effective, very, very shape that lasts for 3 years.
Yeah.
Then you want to allow the mast to bend a little bit. Then use the jumps off as the sail gets a little bit older.
Yeah, I'd agree. So we went fairly stiff with the jumpers. But what you're looking for is if you get a mainsail which seems to be flatter in the top than below, then you have to make sure you've got the jumpers on reasonably tight. And as John says, if that top of the sail starts to fill out with age, then you can slacken them off. So really the answer to the original question, I think, is have a look at the overall shape of that mate. And if the top is flatter, then of course they get the jumpers on. And if you've got too much.
Yeah, they typically sails go deep in the head, where that's where they really start showing it, and that stops things slow. So you've got really old mates, so you want to have pretty slack jumpers on either side.
Yeah.